What if mastering resilience was the secret weapon that we've all been missing? And it really isn't even just mastering resilience, but really being able to see it and understand it from a completely different lens than we've ever looked at it before. What if the truly successful people, those who change their pocket of the world that they were designed to change, what if they had a different relationship with resilience than we do? That's what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. And this all came from really a series of books that I was reading, written by Cameron Haynes and Tim Grover, who have spent tons of time with some of the best people in the world in terms of being resilient and really changing things. People that most of us look up to, these men have spent time with. And in reading their books and hearing the stories that they told, one of the things that stuck out to me was that there was this core thing that all of them had of being resilient. And then what appeared, if you will, was 6 principles that I saw that all of them were sharing and that I was distilling from reading these 3 books by these 2 gentlemen. And we already talked about a couple of them. Principle number 1 being embrace chosen suffering. Principle number 2 of becoming a cleaner and creating your own opportunities. And then today we're going to dive into principle number 3. Discipline is the only talent. Discipline is the only talent. What if all of your talents didn't matter? The only one that did was your level of discipline. Now, this is a really, really interesting one because it hits home, and it probably hits home for a lot of us. And that's okay, because if we're going to be honest, we live very undisciplined lives. Yeah, some of us went off to the military, and the military beat discipline in our lives in certain ways, and we follow that, and we were regimented and so on and so forth. But when we're talking about resilience, and we're talking about the definition of resilience, of being the tiny unglamorous decisions, the tiny unglamorous things we do when things get heavy, confusing, or frustrating. You see, that's the moment when your discipline is really tested, because quite honestly, it's easy to do the right thing when things are well. It's hard to be disciplined. It's hard to still get up and do the thing that you're supposed to do. Let's take it into the physical. You set an exercise goal and you're going to be outside and you're going to exercise. Maybe you did 75 hard or one of those types of programs, and you said you're going to be outside and exercise every single day. And yeah, well, it's lightning and thundering today. It's not safe for me to go outside. And so you don't. You justify that. You can't. It's not safe. And so you did that today. And then you went back out tomorrow, but 2 days from now, maybe it's a little cold. And you see, and that's where discipline starts to wane. That's where discipline starts to wane. But here's the deal. Discipline shows up in every facet of our life. Now, it's easy for us to look at it in the physical. It's easy to look at the exercise. It's easy to look at the plate. Those are the ones we talk about a lot. Right? But what about in your communication? Are you disciplined in the way you communicate? Are you disciplined in the way you think? And for me, that, my friends, has been a journey over the last 7 or 8 years. And let me not sit here and tell you that I've mastered it, because I haven't. Let me not sit here and tell you that I'm great at it, because I haven't, because I'm not. I fail and I struggle with this constantly. About 8 years ago, I weighed over 300 pounds, over 320 pounds to be exact. And I remember one day, I don't remember what day of the week it was. I think it was a weekend though. I remember one day sitting in my living room and my son was there, and we were having a conversation, and he asked me a question. And he asked me this question. He says, Dad, you always tell us to strive for things. You always tell us not to give up. You always tell us to stay focused and be disciplined on things. And you have this attitude of just get it done. And you have taught us that. And so why can't you just get it done and lose the weight? And it hit me like a ton of bricks. One, because I was being a hypocrite to my child, but two, because the thing that I realized in that moment, almost instantaneously, was that in my life, I had a commitment to not being disciplined. At that time of my life, I had a commitment to not being disciplined. Yeah. That's why I gained all the weight. That's why it was hard to lose. That's why I wasn't even trying to lose it. Because there were so many areas of my life that I was undisciplined. Again, I'm not sitting here and telling you that I'm the paragon of discipline now. I still fail often, daily, moment by moment in a lot of different areas. But I started to realize when my son said that it was a mindset. Discipline was a mindset. Discipline was a choice that I got to make, and I was choosing not to. I was choosing not to. You see, so often we think about discipline, we think about, if we go back to even the military or for some of us, our parents, that discipline, that it was somebody standing over you and this was the law and this was the rule and you had to follow it. Otherwise there were punishments and there were consequences. Yeah, so that's forced discipline, but that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what we're talking about here, because you see, that creates behavior modification, but what it doesn't do is create psychological and emotional modification. Okay? What we're talking about here is when the person you're accountable to, the person that you have to say, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore, I'm going to do this instead, is staring you right in the mirror. That's the person. You see, discipline isn't about the fact that somebody outside is holding you accountable and so you did it because of that. Yeah, okay, that can help you and it can motivate you. But let's be honest, how many times do we justify and how many times do we make excuses, or how many times do we look at it in a way that we shine, spin the story in a way that shines a good light on us, that they'll understand why. But let's be honest, when you stand in the mirror and you look at yourself dead in the eyes, you know the truth. You can't spin. Now, a lot of us do lie to ourselves, and so we do need to stop. In order to be disciplined, you must stop lying to yourself. That's one of the hardest things for me to do years ago, and it's still difficult at times. We tell ourselves these stories about ourselves, and then we believe the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, and the story is based in fiction. The story is based in fiction. Let me all right, I'm be real transparent. Y'all want this one? I'll be real transparent. So I was 325 pounds, y'all. And I was eating all kinds of stuff. And I used to have really, really bad flatulence, really bad gas. And so I used to say that I wasn't fat. It was just the gas. And I really believed that. And I believed that if I could, just get the gas out and maybe just do a few workouts, I'll be okay. The weight will come off, because it was really more gas than anything else. Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of gas, dude. But it was a lie that I was telling myself. It was a lie that I was telling myself. We lie to each other as well in business, and we say, okay, so it's okay. This is a lie I'm telling myself right now. Okay, it's okay to not go do more business development right now, because we got to get the product right. Yeah, that's another lie I'm telling myself right now. Okay, so I said, yeah, T, I'm talking to you, right? That's a lie we're telling. We got to fix that. You see, we've got to get to this place where we can be radically honest with ourselves. And that's the only way we get to discipline. You see, when we can be radically honest with ourselves, you ain't got to be radically honest with anybody else. You ain't got to tell anybody that you think you're fat because you're flatulent, because you got a lot of gas. You ain't got to be that honest with anybody else. But you damn sure got to look in the mirror and tell yourself the truth. It ain't gas, dude. It ain't. It ain't gas. You're fat. You're fat because of the decisions that you've made. You're fat because of the food that you eat. You're fat because of the lack of movement in your life. You're fat. You got to be able to tell yourself the truth. You see, because once you can tell yourself the truth, what's on the other side of that truth is this decision that we talked about earlier about being disciplined. What's on the other side is the decision about being disciplined. It's a decision. This is what I've learned over the last 8 years of working on myself with this. It's a decision. It isn't a process. It isn't a weaning. It isn't a, oh, I'll slowly get there. It's a decision. It's a decision. You get to decide every moment of every day who you are. And those decisions that you're making dictate the outcomes that you have. And you see, if you can get this discipline in those decisions, you change the outcome. You change the outcome. You know, I had a mentor many years ago, and he's passed away now, J.R. Reidinger, and he said this, and I learned this from him in my early 20s, and I didn't quite understand it. I logically understood it, but I didn't quite understand it until 8 years ago, when my son said those words to me. And what he used to say back then, that's so true, is it takes 1/1000th of a volt to snap across your cerebral cortex for you to change your mind, for you to make a decision. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. Now, the challenge is our reality may not currently line up with the decision that we make, but that's where the discipline, that's where those tiny, unglamorous actions, those tiny, unglamorous decisions, that's where they come into play. After you've allowed that 1/1000th of a volt to cross your cerebral cortex and say, I've made a choice. This is my choice. Yeah, the world doesn't instantly change. But because you made that choice and you continually make that choice over and 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 over again, the world begins to change. The world begins to change. You know, a friend of mine, Kat Merritt, hit me to this concept a little while ago, and it's wild because I did not know this before, and since I've learned it, I've seen it everywhere in so many people's lives, in my own life, which is we all have an unconscious ceiling of how much income we can earn. You and I, we both have a number in our brain that is the ceiling, the cap on how much we can earn in a year. And that's a decision that we're making. We're deciding that that's the cap. So imagine if we decided different. Imagine if we decided different. A few years ago, weight loss journey going well, I looked at my relationship, I looked at my marriage, and I said, you know, there are things that I don't particularly like here. And I'm looking at my spouse and I'm saying, there are things that I don't particularly care for here. And real talk, Y'all know this, how we are as humans. It leads you into this place of resentment. Well, if she was more like this, then this would be different, and I could be more like that. And I remember where I was driving and I was on a roundabout, and it was on that roundabout, and I'm having this conversation. I'm driving home. I'm having this conversation with myself about, well, if she was more like, and it was in that moment that I realized I made a decision that she was the one who had to change. I made the decision that she was the one who had to change. And so what if I made the decision that I was the one that had to change? What would happen then? You see, going back to principle number 2, a cleaner creates their own opportunities. And so a cleaner doesn't wait for permission. A cleaner doesn't point the finger. A cleaner doesn't say it's your fault, you got to do. A cleaner creates opportunities. And so now when I'm looking at discipline as the only talent, then I've got to think about that for myself and realize that if I need the situation to be different, I can sit here and point the finger at someone else and say, well, when they change, when the conditions are perfect, then I can become a closer. But if I need to be a cleaner in my life, and as we talked about in principle number 2, if I need to be able to create opportunities, then it doesn't matter where they are. I'm the one who has to make the decision. I make the decision. See, when I make the decision, and I continually make the decision every single day, every single moment, that, my friends, is the only talent that you need. That, my friends, is the talent of being disciplined. That's what it takes. So I gotta ask you to look in the mirror now. And maybe you don't want to admit this in public. Maybe you need someone to share it with as well. If you do, just send me an email and I'd love to listen to you. But I want you to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself. Tell yourself the lies that you've been telling yourself. And tell yourself that they're lies. Tell yourself that they're lies. And then tell yourself what the actual truth is about you. And in some of these things, you may not even know. It may take some work. You may not even know up front. And that, my friends, is okay. That is part of the journey. That is part of the journey. You gotta look yourself in the mirror. You gotta figure out what those lies are. And then you gotta ask yourself, so what is true of me? And you gotta discover who you truly are and love you for where you are right now. Love yourself for where you are right now.